Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding Your Joy. Paula Vail here. I am so excited today to share with you a gentleman who I previously have interviewed, and I just love his inspiration and his knowledge and information. I think you're just absolutely going to love this show. And we are actually doing 2 episodes. We are going to do part 1 and part 2 for you because Rob has so much to share. Well, my guest today is Rob Leonett. He is a transformational speaker, author, and entrepreneur. His mission is to help others discover the keys to lasting positive change that enables them to make empowering choices. Yes, that align with their authentic selves and live their most joyful, healthy, and fulfilling lives. Thank you. First off, welcome. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Paula. It's so great to be here again. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day for talking to me twice. Oh, my goodness. Thank God you're sitting down because this could be traumatic.
We are going to have some fun. We are. And Rob, you've been a guest on my show previously.
Yeah.
But for those who are familiar with you and your background, can you share your approach to self-empowerment and what prompted you to become interested in helping others with their awareness and their positive changes to be made?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. Yeah, it's amazing how we all kind of find our own path during life. And I mean, I try to help build those meaningful self-awareness conditions that enable folks to make those choices. And again, boy, talk about a perfect title to a show to be speaking about choices, right? I mean, my passion really, Paula, started from pretty poignant lessons that I learned through really a lifetime of self-discovery and the pursuit of what I like to think of as pretty deep knowledge in the fields of like human behavior, motivation, performance. And my goal has always been to deliver something actionable for people to reconnect with their own truth and own their destiny. And we'll see as we discuss today that a lot of people's angst and anxiety and kind of going around like a cork on a river and not their own path has a lot to do with losing their authentic selves through life. And it's extremely common. It's happened to me. It happens to lots, but hopefully we can give some constructive awareness techniques and at least advice. I mean, that's where I think the power in just a sentence, a bullet item, a phrase. You never know where good advice will come from, and certainly there's sources from everywhere, but you don't relate to everything. How could you? There's 7 billion people on the planet. There's a finite number of folks like myself and yourself who have great advice, and we hope we reach people. My goal is to reach one, and that would be great. But some of these lessons that I learned are really rooted in my own childhood trauma, where so much begins. I'm pertaining to mental and physical hardships personally, which led to a long battle with anxiety and depression. It went unrecognized and untreated for years, and subsequently manifested into some pretty bad health problems. Mm-hmm. The mind and the body are so connected, and chronic stress is just the world's worst debilitating condition. I mean, I'm part of the community that believes chronic stress is at the root of most illness and disease. When you disrupt your homeostasis, the state of your body to optimally function. I mean, that's why our temperature is 98.6. It goes to below or above, and your body is fighting an infection. It's a very delicate balance, and when it goes out, it's something called allostatic load, which means your body is fighting stress, and this is cumulative over years, and you don't want to be in that position. And I found myself there, and I'll talk about that and how I got past it. But being a health practitioner, yourself, and into healing methodologies and techniques, what do you think of that that perspective that chronic stress is really one of the core roots of all illness?
Oh, I really believe that, Rob. I think stress affects us emotionally, it affects us physically. It affects the energy, what level
Right.
we reside in energetically. And I believe that our energy really tells our DNA what to do. I mean, it is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't be more on the same page. It's amazing. It's all about energy and frequency and just living in an optimal state. And your techniques and your Reiki are just amazing to help people get back on that path to evenness, to that homeostasis. I mean, there's so many different ways you could phrase things. That's a medical or scientific term, just being even, being mindful. It all means the same. And really, that's what I'm saying, that people's delivery and different people, the way they approach discussions like this, you relate to a certain number of folks, and you hope you just reach as many as possible. But thank you for sharing that. And just to round out about why me, why am I have this little bit of a calling in my life, which I found extremely meaningful, because when I look back, even a long time ago, going through the personal fire that I existed, even as a kid, I prayed that no one else was struggling. No one else was enduring hardships like I was. And, but, you're worldly, even young, that it's a big world and there must be other people out there having the unfortunate circumstance of being victims of abuse. And that, that really infuriated me as a kid. And it broke my heart at the same time, even though I was knee deep in things. So I made a conscious decision right then and there to own the pain. I knew I'd get through it somehow. That's where faith comes in. And use whatever lessons would come of it as a gift for something bigger than myself. I just didn't know how. I was, very young going through this, but I'll let you know how that manifested. Because like yourself, in my personal and professional life, we've both been blessed to meet so many kind, amazing people. And, some of the people that I met actually helped to save my life and get past these years of trauma, which you never really lose completely. And that's what people need to understand. It's always a work in progress. You're always healing, but awareness and treatment is really key. So the more people that came into my life and the deeper my friendships, the more I noticed similarities in the narrative of their journeys. Everybody's life, you hit crossroads, you need to make decisions that are life affirming or life changing. The good fortune that's come, the triumph and the tragedy, and all of this, and relating it back to myself, I had distilled this common theme, which is really how we make our choices, is the primary factor governing our happiness. And this sounds really, really simple and blatantly like stupid obvious, but it's far from it. And it was during this realization period in my life that I experienced the moment of clarity that led me here. What if I could constructively impart really what was decades of experiential wisdom, which is basically my experience, firsthand instead of theoretical out of a book. And then my subsequent study of human behavior, I became very excited about the potential and kind of kickstarted my mission. So really, my goal has always been very subtle. It's to help nudge perception from kind of the autonomic, knee-jerk, old pattern way of thinking to more of a conscious observational, like you pause and you consider all the sources of your motivation before you decide on things that are very impactful to your life, and maybe somewhat not impactful, but they add up cumulatively. So doing that, even in a nanosecond, and we'll talk about that in a moment, gives back a sense of control and empowerment, and the realization that you really are the creators of your destiny, not other people. That's such a fallacy, and it's so easy to say and so hard to do.
Yes.
So, you know, let's help people dump the victim mentality and make better and more authentic choices based on them, based on their truth, not what the world tells them they should be, not what their parents insisted or their friends raise an eye and say, how could you think of doing that? You know, live authentically. It's the route to happiness. And I can't think of a more profound way to give back or express the blessings in my life than to share that kind of knowledge.
Yes.
And that's kind of like how I got here.
Rob, I would love to ask you, you mentioned our authentic self. Tell us more about that and what that means if we do disconnect from our authentic self. What are signs of that, and what do we do for that?
Yeah, so I've studied that, and I've seen two different components of really losing one's self along the journey. Your authentic, disconnecting with your authentic self, and the need for connectedness. These are two biological, evolutionary, fundamental human needs. Let me put it this way. If you wake up one day and you say, wow, how did I get here? What happened to my life? This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. I didn't sign up for this. You know, almost a midlife crisis epiphany, which doesn't need to happen in midlife. But that is a sign of the disconnection of where you feel lost, and you just almost are living someone else's life. And I think all the choices you make leading up to that kind of bad day have everything to do with losing your path and giving others the power to make the choices for you. And sometimes that's really easy, but again, that's kind of a victim mentality, which is really easy to slip into almost without knowing. And we want to try to raise the awareness to kind of shake off and put some cold water in your face once you're feeling that disconnection, and get back on the path. And there are ways to do that. You know, people think about change and getting back to where they started from and getting back to authenticity. But when they think of change, I mean, nobody likes work. Nobody likes to put in the work. They'd sometimes be more apt to be sedentary in changing, being disconnected, being inauthentic, being unhappy, being depressed. You know, you have to make a conscious decision from your awareness to change, and then change will happen. But you think, oh my God, it's going to take years, decades. How could I possibly change? I don't know where to start. What does this path look like? The thing about it is, you have to think that it starts in a single moment. The moment where choice lives. the moment where choice lives is everything. It is finite, it is minuscule, and it is everything. It is you, it is your worldview, it is your history, it is your past, from stimuli and response. That gap that your choice is made has everything to do with change. And choices are infinite, and they add up one after another after another. And if you keep on going down a path that's not yours, you can get very, very far away from who you are, and then wake up and, you know, question your very existence. Now, listen, this is very interesting statistic. The average person, you'd be very interested in this, the average person makes up to 35,000 conscious decisions / choices a day.
A day?
That astounded me. Even from a food research paper that I came across, said we make over 200 decisions a day just based on food. Not anything, you know, you could say not anything of meaning, but just on food. So regardless if you make 200 or 35,000, the potential of going off track, not making your best choices is staggering. But not all choices are equal, of course. Most are minor. When do I need to get up and grab a snack? Some are pretty substantial. How do I pay for college? When do I call the lab for those blood test results? Some are straightforward, and some have lots of gray area, and that's the thing. See, but the problem is, each decision we make expends mental energy, and the more we, I mean, you're talking about 200 to 35,000. Our brains need to process and evaluate before decisions can be made. That's that point of singularity. That's that point of decision. That means everything. So no matter how small, they add up. And this means, geez, most of the time, you can't guarantee you're making optimal choices. You just can't. I mean, if you're too drained at the time to even recognize when a certain decision is important or not, you could be really in for a calamity. And I like to call that decision fatigue. And I think it's a major hidden factor that influences everyone's experience. So, you know, since we speak about fatigue, which is vis-a-vis the mind and the brain function and all this glorious biology and chemistry, and, you know, I'm a really open-minded person. I'm very spiritual, but yet I'm a natural skeptic that needs proof about everything. So those two don't coexist sometimes, lots of times, but I like to be really evidence-based, and that has to do with medicine and science and biology, and not to get deep, but it really makes a difference because your decisions are made in your mind, which is housed in your brain. So things like that make all the difference between our ears, where our reality lies. So if we are the most high functioning animal on the planet, and evolution has brought us to this place where we're not out in the woods and we're wearing sports jackets and beautiful blouses, you know, why do we have so many issues? Do we overthink everything? Is it analysis through paralysis? I mean, our emotions, our feelings, our behavior, our sense of self always has to do with how we think. I mean, it's as obvious as the nose on my face. I think, therefore I am, the French philosopher René Descartes said, very famous. Consider the obvious fact of your biology in your mind. It's you. You are present in your mind. You think your thoughts. When I talk with people, I consider the subject all the time. And I feel that you have to have an open mind, and that's why spiritual and maybe science, there's this phrase called Einstühnel, and it's a German phrase, it's a concept which refers to becoming so attached to an idea that you won't even consider another one. You know how people get stubborn and you try to say, hey, if you look at it this way, and it just won't work. They're just not that kind of open-minded person. Well, of course, they have a word for that. But I found that keeping your mind open is really a path to achievement.
Yes.
So have you found that in your practice, that maybe some people aren't as open to healing, but then all of a sudden when they open up, there's this, it affects them and the energy flows if they're not closed off? Have you experienced that in your life?
And I've had, people, drag, spouses or friends and loved ones in for Reiki, and then they're like, oh, wow, this is really great. And they open up. You know what you have me thinking, Rob, with this is really, isn't the choice we're making in this moment our most important choice? We can get so caught up in, okay, what's my choice tomorrow going to be? Or what am I going to do next week? But really, isn't the choices we make at the moment the most important? That's what I'm thinking.
I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely 1,000% spot on, because ultimately it's all we have. I mean, you never, the fact of the matter is life begins and life ends. You just don't know. Live every day like it's your last and run out like Rocky and feel great. It may be a little over the top, but not that much, because you don't want to be, God forbid, on your deathbed and say, boy, did I do things wrong? Why did I worry about? The last thing you want to think of when you're about to pass on is, man, I worried too much. You don't want those regrets. You just don't. So to live in that place where choices, or to live in the day where your choices affect the part of the here and now, is arguably the best place. Let me talk a little bit about where these choices stem from, get back to a little bit of science, and let me relate it to myself. So how the choices are made in our biology is really driven by nature and nurture, which really means, I'll try to sum it as quickly as possible. It's tough. The nature part basically is fundamental. We all have our biology, we all have our bodies and our brains. If you're free from genetic or abnormalities or disease, then we're all on a even playing field. We're human beings and we're built. Nurture is a different story. And this is where sometimes the wheels fall off, and it did for me. That correlates to individuals' mental health development during early stages of life. So what could possibly affect that? Well, if your environment is stressful or loving, were you encouraged? Were you left to feel alone and unsupported? Was it secondhand stress? And I like to use that term because just like secondhand smoke, if a baby was indirectly affected by stress, their parents always argued in the next room and they got, very anxious and cried, well, they will develop coping mechanisms to help soothe themselves. And those coping mechanisms are a result of the trauma they experienced. Thus, they're going to keep them. And that trauma, it served its purpose when they were babies, but as they grow, those coping mechanisms usually do not go away. And that is the source of trauma and dysfunction and addiction. So being addicted to anything, just being overly addicted to anything, you name it, you could be addicted to anything. And that is really the end result of coping mechanisms at that nurture level. So now you're kind of disproportionately making decisions out of, many, many unhealthy places. Now, it's difficult. It's difficult. That's why the early days are so important. And now I was affected that way as well. I mean, I was hardwired to be so sensitive to stimuli because of chronic stress,
Yes.
that it manifested in physical ways. This one will floor you. There was a point in my life during extreme stress that my body actually perceived normal functioning, like eating and drinking, as if I was having a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
My nerves were so hypersensitive. The nerves that particularly ran, there's a nerve called the vagus nerve. It runs from your head and it wraps around your inner organs, all of them, and it controls a lot. So when my esophagus functioned and my stomach functioned, this nerve snapped and made me feel like I was having a heart attack. I would sweat. I would have panic attacks, jaw tightness, extreme pain in my chest. That took 2 years to diagnose, and I was the one who diagnosed it. I baffled over 17 different types of doctors and eventually brought my hypothesis to a doctor who gave me low dose of antidepressant to calm the nerve, and it worked. So this is how important stress is to avoid and to nurture young people, and really raise them right, because it has everything to do. Now, I don't want to scare anyone. This is all about educating and understanding the creative design of your own biology. Now, there's a mismatch. There's just a mismatch between our evolution development. We took millions of years to get to a place, and then all of a sudden we got really smart, invented fire and the wheel and all kinds of tools, and all of a sudden we start thinking very high level, but yet our brains are reacting through fight or flight, like there's a saber-toothed tiger coming after us, and it's just a bill in the mail. So our brain is actually, our friend, but we could really be its victim. It's pretty funny to think that we could be the victim of ourselves. So